Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So when I started this channel, I wanted to talk about heroes, and that's primarily what this channel is based around. And to some extent, I have to discuss why the traditional idea of a hero is being rejected by modern culture, or at the very least, the entertainment and media of modern culture. And I do that through various means that I'm familiar with, through the philosophical, through the political, and through the creation of entertainment. And a lot of times through a connection of all three of those things, because you see a connection within modern media of those three things. And I try my best to steer clear of subjective analysis of things, to say, like many other channels do, because I don't like X thing, therefore Y thing is bad. I try to give, instead, a more objective take on it, to look at the rational and logical reasons why people act the way that they do. And to me, a logical analysis of a problem is the best analysis, and I don't really need anything else. But a lot of other people want more than that, and so every once in a while, like this video, I try to go back to the horse's mouth and show you exactly why the idea of hero is dying, and in this instance is dying because of a connection to false ideas that have taken over entertainment and the way people make entertainment. And the idea that we're going to look at today that is contrary to really what people want as entertainment, and to some extent the heroic ideal, is the idea that diversity is a strength. Or at the very least, within the reports that I'm looking at, that diversity is the future and how entertainment must proceed. And the primary source that I'm going to be looking at here is the apparently annual UCLA diversity report for movies and television. However, before I get there, I just want to remind everyone that there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels, and 1 return to form for low fantasy, sword and sorcery. These are all stories based upon the traditional heroic ideal, going back to the traditional and merit-based methods of making comics. And you're looking at some of the spectacular art from those in the background. So if that appeals to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. Also, within the next little while, I will be coming out with what is essentially a webcomic. It is called Fade to Blue, and I was just going to release it, but really I should do this properly. So I want to create a trailer around it and do a couple of things like that before I release it. And also, if you want to hear more of my takes on what I talk about, usually here on Saturdays, I do a live stream every Wednesday. We talk more about the artistic every second Wednesday. We focus on indie comics that you might want to buy. And I alternate that with talking about more the artistic and creative way of making something with merit. And those are structured wherein I give my basic argument within the first 20-25 minutes, and then I just talk to the audience for the rest of the time. Usually we go about an hour. So you might want to check that out every Wednesday night, usually around 8 to 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Anyways, let's get back to my topic and these UCLA diversity reports. Now, as I mentioned, these reports have been coming out apparently for the last 10 years. Now, this is the first that has come onto my radar, but apparently it's fairly influential within Hollywood. And the reports are divided up yearly into 2 parts, one for movies and one for television, and they come out at different times during the year. This is the 2024 report, which is an analysis of 2023. These are free online, and I will put a link in the description for them if you want to go over and read them yourself. But what they basically are is academic reports. Well, they appear to be academic reports. They're not very academic, if you ask me, but I'll get into that in a little bit. But they are, quote unquote, academic reports from UCLA that are meant to be an authoritative source that people can point to say, you see, within entertainment and the creation of entertainment, diversity is our strength. And not only that, but is the way of the future. And it uses a lot of numbers and charts to present its argumentation which is faulty from the get-go, but argumentation nonetheless. And to some extent, I'll have to say, it does its job well. Why? Because its job is to be sophistry. It's not actually a solid or valid argument, not based upon the metrics that it itself gives. But honestly, the only thing that it needs to do is be good enough to convince the people who are making television and movies that it is authoritative and real. And I'm sure it does that. Why? Well, simply put, because people who make entertainment are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. It doesn't take very much in order to convince them of something that is not true. You take a prestigious or quote-unquote prestigious academic institution like UCLA, you slap that on the front, you put a whole bunch of charts and numbers in an academic format, and you tag a conclusion on the end that quite honestly is not supported by anything that comes before, and it becomes something that is authoritative for certainly the people in Hollywood. And that's quite honestly where I came across this to begin with. Since I'm a writer, I listen to videos from writers to get their takes on certain things every once in a while, and YouTube decided to recommend to me videos from this woman who is a screenwriter, and she talks about how to insert diversity into your screenwriting. Now, she doesn't have a large channel, but she is a screenwriter. She works as a screenwriter. She deals with other screenwriters, with showrunners, and this video, quite honestly, is just her low-key-ist of the racial type, and I have to say it that way because of our hosts here. I should find another way to say it, or at the very least for this video, I'll call it colorist. She's a colorist. And yes, I know that means something completely different. I actually hire colorists, so yeah. But you'll know what I mean for this video. She's a person who is an ist that focuses on race. And it wouldn't be, I'm sure, shocking to you to hear that she is a quote-unquote person of color, and her video, when talking about inserting diversity into screenwriting, is all about how when she tried to rewrite something that she was working on, she found to her horror that she automatically went back to a white perspective. And of course, that was something that she had to completely get rid of because, well, she's not white herself. And that is not the future of Hollywood. Why? Because, as she quotes here, almost as if it were gospel, because of the UCLA diversity report. And one of the other funny things about her videos was that she seems to have absolutely no clue in the world that she's such a colorist, nor does it appear that she gets any pushback whatsoever on either that fact or the fact that she's taking this UCLA diversity report as if it were gospel. Because again, she's someone who is a screenwriter, works with other screenwriters, works with showrunners. She gives no indication, and yes, I know lack of evidence is not evidence, but the combination of these things strongly suggests that she gets zero pushback from this when working with those around her. All right, so let's look at these reports itself. Well, they're really two reports that are making up one full year of reports for 2024, half about television, half about movies. And I'm just looking at the 2024 ones. I'm not going back to the other 10 years worth of this stuff. But what is their assumption that they begin with at the very first of each of these reports? Well, it's something that if you were to state it as a conservative on the internet, as a politician, anything, you would be called a conspiracy theorist. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put the report up in the background. I probably already have been doing so by this point. That's what you're looking at. But this page that I give you in the background right now is the page that begins each of these reports. And what does it say if you're not watching the screen? Well, it says that although right now white people make up about 57% of America, the number of non-white people, being about 43%, is increasing about half a percentage point per year. And their projection into the future is that within the next 15 years, white people will be a minority within the United States of America. Now, as I said, this is the basic argument that is to support everything else that comes afterwards. And quite honestly, I don't even have to go any farther than this. I will, but I don't have to show you that the entire thing is then faulty. Why? Well, number one, they're basing it on what they project will actually come to be rather than on what actually is. That's no way to actually do an academic argument. When you argue rationally and logically, you argue in the present indicative active according to what is. And if you want to project into the future after that, you go ahead and do so. But you must make the argument first about what is and why you're doing it that way. Secondly, the argument itself makes no sense if their argument is since this will be the majority of people within the country and within the audience in the future, we should make entertainment specifically for this majority, then why doesn't it hold right now? Since the majority of people within the country right now are, according to their own statements, white, why are you not right now making entertainment or promoting the making of entertainment for the majority? Why? Because it's not about what the majority actually is, nor what they want. It's about being colorist in a very specific anti-white way. And again, this is borne out by some of the stuff they say in the rest of the entire report. Thirdly, what they do in the rest of the report is to also bring women into this minority status. Women seem to fade in and out of their so-called statistical analysis of everything, depending on where they can be useful. That is to say, when women are needed to prove their point, they include women, and where women are not needed to prove their point or actually muddy their point or make it go in the opposite direction, then they exclude them from their analysis. Because quite honestly, an honest analysis would be to say that since women make up about 51% of the population and minorities make up about 43% of the population, even adjusting for the overlap, there would be, if you included both all the time, 70% of the population within the demographic of who they're trying to analyze, and that would make sense. That would be a very legitimate argument to say we're looking at what 70% of the people in the country actually want as entertainment and then base our argumentation on that. But they don't do that. Now, even that would take some additional resources and additional analysis to prove points from that. But at the very least, it would be a secure footing, a much more secure footing than the one that they give in order to analyze things. But again, they don't do that. Women seem to fade in and out of their analysis depending on when they're useful. Which again, to me, points back to the fact that, yeah, this isn't about minorities at all. It's about sophistry. It's about selling these ideas to the people who are in charge of entertainment, whether they're true or not. And the fourth thing from just this introduction is a blanket colorist statement to begin with, which is the assumption that all people who are not white think in the same way. Because quite literally, that's the basis of their argumentation. Even though they go to break down by sections the minorities that are included in their analysis, where they're from, and yes, they include other factors. Once again, like the women factor, they also put in gender, religion, non-Christian religions, by the way. And they even include in 2024 disability status, things like that. But again, these fade in and out according to when they're useful. But the point is that when they focus on people who are not white, they assume the people who are not white, no matter where they're from, no matter what their color, no matter what their ancestry, it doesn't matter if they're black or Hispanic or Asian or anything else, as long as they're not white, it appears that they lump them all together at the end of the point that they're trying to make. Again, they break it down when they're giving statistical analysis, so-called statistical analysis, but it's all based upon this assumption from the first that if you're not white, then you're all lumped together as one. Now, I'm not going to go into very much specifics about all of these reports. Again, links are in the description if you want to go over and look at them yourself. My point is that they're used in an authoritative way when their analysis is anything but authoritative according to a rational, logical, or sound argument. And it doesn't take a whole lot of in-depth research into what they're saying in order to see this. First off, they give the people or the institutions that actually sponsor this research to begin with. These include Netflix, the Golden Globes, the Latino Film Institute, Walt Disney, Hulu, as well as the UCLA Division of Social Sciences. And if you've followed any kind of news about entertainment industries like Netflix, like Walt Disney, like Hulu, they all have a significant, quote-unquote, progressive bent in the way that they are run. And I would say that this affects the way that the argumentation within these reports are actually put forward. But we'll leave that where it is because I want to get into some more grounded analysis of these reports itself. And that grounded analysis consists really of only three things. Number one, although they state where they get their metrics from at the first of these reports, and it is a number of sources that are usually used in Hollywood for analyzing what is going on within television and the film industry, they never give any indication of how they process all of this information into the charts and numbers that they give. So my point in stating that really is the fact that this, again, is a so-called academic report by a so-called academic institution meant to prove a point. But if it was an actual academic study, what they would usually do would be to take the numerous sources that they actually used as data points and then give a description before anything else of how they crunch the numbers and how they do the analysis through a detailed description, and B, usually mathematical formulas. But of course, zero of that is done here. But of course, as I said, that methodology is not given here because honestly, it's not an academic report. It's just a statement of sophistry needed to do the very bare minimum of convincing the not very bright people in Hollywood that what it says is true and therefore authoritative. Secondly, if you look at the way that they actually present numbers within this report, it's usually done in the terms of percentages. And they're fairly consistent on that. But the point is that when you use percentages, that actually hides a lot of information. And I would say they probably use percentages because they want to hide a lot of information. You can make something look spectacularly good or spectacularly bad based upon just using percentages as your metric instead of the actual numbers for things. And really, their main takeaway here for both of these reports is the fact that these non-white people are, by percentage, actually watching entertainment that is much more concentrated on non-white, aka diverse and diversely produced entertainment. Therefore, their assumption is that diverse audiences, according to these percentages, actually want this. But that excludes, at the very least, right off the top of my head, two very significant points that you should automatically ask about if you're going to make such a statement. Number one being the elephant in the room of, do you think that these people of non-white origin are watching more and more diverse entertainment simply because there is more and more diverse entertainment because you've been pushing this for the last 10 years? That could possibly be the case, but they never ever bring up that point whatsoever. They just assume that they are watching this entertainment. Well, it's not actually an assumption. They state it outright within their conclusion. They're watching this kind of diverse, quote unquote, diverse entertainment because they want to see people like themselves, which again, they give zero evidence of, except to go back to these percentages. And the other point that quickly comes to my mind when looking at everything presented here as percentages is to ask, okay, let's assume that what you're saying is true and that the percentages of these non-white people watching quote unquote diverse entertainment is going up and up and up. Does that mean that their diverse entertainment is actually doing well? Because here's the thing, and this is where I get very upset with people who say things like, comics are for everyone. I would say comics as a form of entertainment, just like any other form of entertainment, are for the people who read comics. And for me, as someone as a comic producer, a graphic novel producer, my graphic novels and comics are for people, A, who read comics, and B, are willing to pay for them. I'm not going to make a product based upon the wants of people who A, are not going to read what I put out, and B, certainly who aren't going to buy it. So what does it matter if you're even correct about these percentages going up? Does that mean that the consumption of these products is actually leading to more revenue? And really, that's the whole nub of the point, which gets me into the third part of why these authoritative, quote unquote, analysis don't mean anything. It's because at the end of these reports, what you get as the second last section for each of these reports is a section called the bottom line. Now, the funny thing is that within the movie section of this, they actually give numbers. They actually give how much money certain films produce, and they do go into a very little bit of whether or not this affects the bottom line itself. But when you get into the television section, they give zero numbers for anything, which is funny because, again, this is called the bottom line, and the infographic that they give for it is a television symbol or a movie symbol next to a dollar sign. All that the bottom line section in the television part of the report is about is a preamble to their conclusion. And I might add that within the movie section, where they give the actual numbers, once again, it's based upon all of the faulty analysis, or at the very least, the unproven analysis that they gave through the entire report in order to view those numbers in a positive, quote unquote, positive, according to them, way, which shows, again, quote unquote, shows, because they really haven't proven that point, but shows that these minorities are the ones driving the money train for this industry. And quite honestly, I could go into a breakdown of certain sections to show how ridiculous some of this is, but this video is going to be too long as it is. But let's get into the end point of this, which is their conclusion, which they so-called have proven with their analysis, which again is really just a way of presenting something to their already selected audience of the people who make television and movies so that they can point to these reports as authoritative and based upon genuine analysis in their minds anyway. Funny enough, their conclusions actually have a bit of a silver lining to them in the fact that part of what they're trying to do is to shame Hollywood, both television and movie makers, in saying that, hey, wait a second, you're starting to pull back from this wholehearted, but in their analysis, still not good enough, investment in diversity. You best not do that. So I just want to read a couple of quotes for you, first from the television one and then a short one from the movie section of it, just to give you really the gist of their entire argument within their own words. In the television report, they conclude as follows: if the conglomerates that own Hollywood studios and networks want to maximize opportunities for profitability and make wise economic investments in the face of a rapidly changing Hollywood landscape, they should look no further than the findings in this report series that show increasingly diverse audiences gravitate towards increasingly diverse content. To maintain interest from audiences composed of cord cutters, they must provide television programming with familiar faces and perspectives their audiences find most appealing to them. So I'll stop here just for a second and remind you that, again, they're talking about maximizing profitability, and yet within their section on the bottom line, they give zero numbers and really zero argumentation about how this entire thing is going to increase profitability. Secondly, I have to point out that what they're saying right here is that Hollywood needs to take this report as being authoritative. As they say, they should look no further than the findings in this report. And thirdly, once again, their assumption is that people want to watch television programs with other people who look exactly like them and they find more appealing, which again goes back to my points A from the first that, well, why aren't they doing that right now? Because the majority of people are white, yet they're not doing that now. B, they assume that their analysis is that these people of diverse backgrounds are watching more and more diverse entertainment because they want to see people just like them, not because of any other factors. And again, the third point being that they take this entire lump of people who are not white, stick them all together, and assume that you can make some kind of profitable entertainment off of this way of presenting television programs, when it makes zero sense if you look at the breakdown of all of these separate minorities which make up this conglomerate group of non-whites if you're going to make a television show for each of them so that, assuming that you're correct, they want to see familiar faces and only people who look like them, you're going to have a whole lot of small programs for very small minorities of people, which again does not lead to a maximization of profitability. They also go on to say that stories written from diverse perspectives result in more plausible characters and make for more interesting television and boost the show's overall appeal. Again, this is a statement they're making in their conclusion, but they have zero evidence and presented zero evidence to actually support that claim. But it is their closing remarks that are the most telling. And I'll read you the closing remarks first from the television and then from the movies section, because they're quite similar. The television section says, reversing the progress made on the diversity front in the past 10 years would be a grave mistake for Hollywood. In the television sector, an investment in more diverse programming would appear to be the best long-term strategy for industry growth and profitability as the nation's population inches closer to majority-minority status. In short, adapting to the interest of today's increasingly diverse audience is the only viable way for Hollywood to move forward. And the closing remarks for the movie section says, if Hollywood sacrifices the progress it made on diversity, how will it sustain itself? ? Any new version of Hollywood needs to prioritize investing in diversity in front of and behind the camera. If movie studios disregard the findings from this report series that highlight the importance of giving increasingly diverse audiences the films they want to see, they do so at their own peril. Okay, so first off, you have to remember that what these papers are doing is presenting themselves as authoritative analysis that people can use in order to prove their points that they're making here, that, again, diversity is our strength, especially within making entertainment, because it is also the future of your audience. And that point is given right here within this conclusion, wherein it says you should look no further than this report in order to figure out your future path. But here's the thing. It's a report, not an analysis. But it's a report that presents itself as if it was an analysis. The body gives a whole bunch of statistical, well, I'll just put it plainly, mumbo jumbo, because they use nothing but percentages, and then at the end says, use this report. That is to say, we have proven our point. Use this to then go on and institute the things that we state at the first of this entire thing. But it's a report. It's not an analysis. It's simply reporting on the fact that this is the way that it is. That's partly why I would say they don't give a detailed structure, or at the very least can get away with not giving a detailed structure of their analysis to begin with. And that's also why I assume they don't have to actually prove what they're saying. They're just making blanket statement based off the last blanket statement, based off the last blanket statement, none of which they've actually proven, because it's just a report. But again, in this conclusion and within the body, they're claiming and assuming that the people who read this report are using it as if it was an analytical tool to prove the point that diversity is the future and your strength. That right there is a clever bit of sophistry. And secondly, I'll have to point out that no matter whether this is an analysis or a report, this is no way to actually conclude any kind of academic documentation. Academic documentation should be non-biased, should be non-partisan, should not give a commentary on something outside of the purview of what they've just presented within their paper. And the statement bordering on threat that if the entertainment industry does not follow the recommendations given in this report, or they will fail, is completely outside of the purview of an academically presented report. Again, not only is this projecting into the future, their analysis, which they assume to be 100% correct, which is not logical and rational. You should concentrate on what you have and how it works right now. Possibly possibly give a statement about how it will proceed. Again, if what your analysis proves is actually true, which again, they don't prove anything here. But these statements, which again are half threatening, betray the entire point of why such a document was created. This isn't academic in any way. First of all, it's not an analysis, it's a report. Secondly, they're not following academic standards, even though they're coming from an academic institution. And thirdly, they're claiming to be authoritative because they're based in authoritative sources. Again, authoritative sources being UCLA, and the founders, which are Disney and Netflix, which again, this entire thing is an appeal to authority, to give these people within Hollywood something to hang their hat on than just to appeal to authority. They'll say, no, look at this report. That is my authority, assuming that no one ever actually reads the report nor puts it through the rigor of, heaven forfend, critical thinking to come to some conclusions like I have, which I fully admit, maybe there are answers to each of these questions and points that I have brought up. But if there is, they should have at very least have been acknowledged within the body of this report. Even if it was just to say, such and such is outside of the purview of this paper. But really, this is my entire point in going over this entire thing. This, once again, is just kicking the can down the road of an appeal to authority. This report itself has no authority, except itself to be based upon an appeal to authority. It proves nothing. It gives no analysis, let alone an analysis that is logical and rational. There is no reality base for any of the statements made here, especially the ones in the conclusion. The simple assumption made at the first is the assumption presented as being proven at the end, which is diversity is our strength and the future. Why? Because we say so. Because we've given you garbled information that makes it look like there is actual numbers to support this, which again is just something you can point to and say authoritatively, like the woman I talked about at the first of this video, making your own videos about screenwriting and inserting diversity, can point to it as if it were gospel and say, you see, it's true. And although, as I said, and they acknowledge right here in the conclusion that people are starting to draw back a little bit from this idea that diversity is the wave of the future, again, what do? They threaten them and say, well, you best not go in that direction. Why? Well, because we have authority on our side. This is not the way to present anything that is going to be based upon a merit system. It is an assumption of who their future audience will be, instead of looking at what is actually their audience now and what they actually want. Sure, if you take some of this report and clean it up a little bit, give some actual proof as to what they say is true, besides referencing variety articles or whatever else they do within the footnotes, it might have some kind of standing. It might have some kind of relevance towards building an industry that focuses on what their audiences actually want. But again, the analysis is based upon that initial statement, which is given at the first of each of the reports, that white people will be the minority pretty soon. Therefore, focus on this future majority conglomerate because they're your new audience. Giving, as I said, zero proof that this is their actual audience, an audience being someone who A, watches it, and B, spends the money for it. But this is what Hollywood is still made of. And yes, I'm talking about movies and television here, but this is all of entertainment. I've done similar analysis of people making such blanket statements and referring to such blanket reports for the comic industry as well, especially when I did that video about them pointing towards the statistical analysis, quote unquote, given to them by GLAAD, which is an institution specifically set up to promote the conditions necessary for certain minority groups to get ahead. And to get back to my primary statement within this video, this is why the idea within modern media and entertainment of a traditional hero is no longer presented. Why? Because such an idea is based upon the human. It's based upon concepts like there is a human nature and we strive for something better, and we can calculate that something better from being human itself, wherein these reports are pushing the idea that no, you have to concentrate on the color of someone's skin, or who they sleep with, or what they have between their legs. That's the only thing that's going to draw them into actually consuming your entertainment. Why? Because as they make the blanket statement here, that makes, in their minds, more compelling characters. No, it doesn't. And oh, by the way, they never, ever even consider the fact that perhaps you can make entertainment that will appeal to both of these groups. That is to say, the white group and the non-white group. How? By focusing on something human, by focusing on something we all have in common. Again, that would lead back to ideas of human nature, that we all have something within us that makes us human, but they cannot and will not go in that intellectual direction ever. Why? Because of their ideological bent. An ideological bent which is based upon the division of people, which ensures that you can't have a hero for all people. And that is why you're going to continue to see this kind of push and this kind of entertainment and media coming out of Hollywood and the big entertainment producers for, I would say, years and years to come. They have the momentum of 10 years of this nonsense already built up within the system, with people pointing to it and saying, that's authority. Not that's reality, but that's authority, and we're going to follow that. And when things, no matter whether how superfluous it is, even going back to something like entertainment, but when things base themselves on an appeal to authority rather than an appeal to reality, then at the end of the day, you're simply going to get a product that is at best subjective sophistry. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels. And after I'm done speaking here, I will play for you the short 45-second trailer for my graphic novel, Crom the Destroyer. So, if any of that appeals to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.